So in the second lecture, we're going to move forward with the story. And the story unfolds over a period of 30 plus years. So it's almost sometimes, I think, kind of like watching a baseball game. Lots of innings, and there are lulls in the action, and then there's intense action. So also like baseball games, sometimes there's a lot of excitement, sometimes there's not. So please write down any questions that you might have. If you remember, in the last lecture we talked a little bit about Calvin and his ideas and why they were appealing to people, and his attempts to spread his theology and his church into France. And remember that Calvin really combines two things, a deep spiritual faith and a theology that's very clear and very spelled out in his Institutes on Religion, but he also combines the idea of political power, and he combines religion and politics and political power, really, in his city in Geneva, and that's sort of a model that then he is able to export far more than Luther was able to do. So it's a system, really, that Calvin creates. In fact, it's called the Institutes, and I think that makes sense. So we talked about the fact that the nobility adopted Calvinism, and the nobility brings with it military experience, and that's going to sort of militarize the Protestant Calvinist churches, and then the Catholics are also going to themselves militarize. And so the scene is set then for these confrontations that become rather bloody at times. We also notice that Catherine de' Medici, who's going to be the regent, is going to try to practice a policy of reconciliation to restore peace and order and harmony. And that makes sense in a Machiavellian sort of way, where Machiavelli argues, between the lion and the fox. And I think Catherine de' Medici is trying to very much use the powers of the fox, that is cunning, to bring about a desired outcome. And really, Catherine's goal, and I don't think I mentioned this in the last lecture, was to preserve her family, the Valois family, who were the kings, to preserve the monarchy, the prestige of the monarchy, and also to preserve the French state. So she's working along those lines, whereas the Catholic League is trying to restore Catholic purity and unity to France, and the Protestants, the Calvinists, are trying to defend their faith and their right to pursue their faith and their truth claim. So that's the sort of the context that we left with. Here you see Catherine the Great there pictured, looking rather serious, and I think there was good reason for her to look serious. So we're going to start again in 1562, the year when things really get going. And in addition to the January Edict, Catherine tried to put together a meeting between the Catholic and the Protestant forces called the Poissy Colloquy. We saw the Marburg Colloquy between Luther and Zwingli back in 1529, and this was again an attempt to bring about a reconciliation between these two factions for the good of France. And again, what's good for France would also be good for the Valois family and the monarchy itself. Well, the Poissy Colloquy, much like the Marburg Colloquy, failed to produce any reconciliation, so there's no movement. Yet we have to remember that the January Edict is still in force, which gave Protestants the right to worship outside towns and hold these meetings called synods. Well, things get disrupted in a major way in March of 1562, as the Duke of Guise, the leader of the Catholic faction, and his troops were out riding from town to town, something that nobles did, and they stumbled upon, or happened upon, an assembly of Protestants at a village or a town called Voici. And these Protestants were in prayer. So it was a meeting of this Protestant congregation, Calvinist congregation at Voici. They were outside the town. So according to the Edict of January, this would have been perfectly illegal. Yet the Duke of Guise and his troops were not ones to stand on legality. They found the Protestants praying. They opened fire on this assembled group of Protestants, and they killed some 30. I've read 80. Numbers are rather vague at this time. But in other words, there was a massacre carried out by the Catholic Duke of Guise and his men. So, in retaliation, in April of 1562, a group of Protestant noblemen, again, the militarization here, seized the town of Orléans And they also seized other towns across France. The Huguenots occupied Rouen, which is the great city of Jeanne d'Arc, the great French and Catholic hero. They also seized Lyon. And they sacked Lyon, which you'll see in the picture in just a second. Lyon was the second city. So let me just flip to that. So here you see on the left the Protestant forces sacking the town of Lyon and again destroying Catholic churches, which is going to be seen as defacing sacred space and as sacrilege from the Catholic point of view, which is only going to motivate the Catholics to want to eradicate the Protestants even more. At this point, the Duke of Guise was also himself assassinated, and this sets in motion what are going to be a series of assassinations over the next 36 years, actually even all the way up to 1610. So we're going to see that the idea of assassinating people, and in particular, who do you assassinate? You assassinate the leaders of a group, thinking, well, the theory is that if you take the leader out of the picture, then the actual group itself, the movement, fizzles. That didn't turn out to be the case. There were always people willing to replace assassinated leaders. But at this point, the Duke of Condé, the leader of the Protestant forces, issued a manifesto, and he declared simply that the Protestants were fighting to defend their faith. So it was really a fight over theological issues. But it was clear to most of the great noble families and the Valois family itself that the Protestants were launching an all-out assault on the French state in order to gain more towns and cities and more territory that they could control from which to defend their faith. So it's not just a matter of prayer and defending the faith. It's also that now the Protestants are taking over towns and areas of France, and that's going to create this idea of a competing state. So a state within a state. And if you have a state within a state, you know, how consolidated is royal authority? And the answer is it's not. So at this point, we're going to move into the fighting that occurred in the 1560s. There were some 3 different wars in the 1560s. And as I said, the Duke of Guise is assassinated in 1563. The Protestant leader himself is assassinated in 1570, and then, as often happens after a period of intense fighting, there are these peace arrangements, these peace treaties that are negotiated. And this happened in 1570 at Saint-Germain-en-Laye. Again, the Valois regent, Catherine of Medici, and King Louis IX are trying again to reach out to the Protestants to offer them concessions, such as the religious freedom in their lands. They recognize Protestant nobility, that is the Protestant princes within France, the nobles. They're given religious freedom in their lands, which reminds us of the Augsburg Settlement of 1555. The Protestants also get this very important right, that is to fortify their towns and cities. And for a town to fortify itself would have been a clear challenge to royal authority. So towns and cities were not permitted to really fortify themselves unless they were on the border with the Holy Roman Empire or the Swiss cantons, and therefore they would help the king defend the state. But otherwise, towns and cities were banned from fortification. Yet the Protestants received this important right. Now, at this point, the peace, Saint-Germain-en-Laye, was supposed to have brought an end to these internal conflicts that were disrupting France. And here you see on the left a great woodcut of the Catholic forces interrupting Protestants at prayer in one of their places of worship within a town. And you can see that the Catholic forces are bearing weapons and pikes and actually beating and or killing the Protestants. So that gives you kind of an idea of the general feeling that was in place. Now, it's also true that by 1570, most of the original belligerents had been killed, mostly by assassination. So there is this hope that the peace will prevail, And that was actually not going to happen. So, the other thing, and I think what makes that not likely to happen or didn't happen because of this, is the Protestant leader is now Admiral Coligny, and he became very close to Louis IX, who had lost his father, Henry II. Catherine is the regent mother. So Louis is rather open to male companionship and a father figure, and Admiral Coligny became that. Yet Admiral Coligny is a Protestant who becomes a close advisor and confidant of the Valois Catholic King Louis. What does Catherine do? Like most mothers, Catherine panics at this idea. And so what's going to happen is that Catherine herself is going to see an opportunity to restore peace and stability by arranging a marriage. And she arranges a marriage between the son of the assassinated Protestant leader, the Prince of Bourbon, and his name is Henry Bourbon. So Henry Bourbon of Navarre is the new Prince of Condé, who's going to lead the Protestants in the future. And he's going to marry the daughter of Catherine, that is, the sister of the French king Louis IX. And these dynastic marriages were very common across Europe. You remember Isabella and Ferdinand. You remember King Henry VIII marrying Catherine of Aragon. Often people, individuals getting married, again, if you remember back to a lecture earlier in the course, they're not asked for their opinions, really. These are arranged marriages, and they're arranged for specific reasons, to promote family interest or the interest of state. And that's what's going on here. And you can look at these two figures. You see Henry of Navarre, Bourbon on the left. You see Margaret, the daughter of Catherine, on the right. I'm not sure they look entirely enthralled or in love, yet they're presented in this way by this artist. And the idea, again, was to cement peace between the Huguenots and the Catholics. And this was something that really was going to work, but it wasn't going to work. Now, why was Catherine so afraid of the Protestants? Well, in part, we need to then turn our attention to affairs outside of France. Admiral Coligny, the Protestant leader in France, began to communicate directly with Protestant leaders in the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands were controlled by Spain. They were Spanish territories, though they're the Netherlands. So that's one thing to remember, and that's a result of dynastic marriage too. So the Netherlands is going to experience its own internal conflicts and disorders caused by, you guessed it, religion. And the Protestant leaders begin to reach out to one another in these various different countries. So the French Admiral Coligny, leader of the French Protestants, reaches out to William of Nassau up in the Netherlands and offers assistance as the Dutch Protestants are trying to fight a war of rebellion, really a revolution, against their Spanish overlords. This had Catherine quite concerned that the state, the Catholic state of France, the kingdom rather of France, would actively aid a Protestant group against another Catholic kingdom was a little bit too much for Catherine. Now, it is true that the French kings had a long-standing policy of making alliances with Protestant princes in the Holy Roman Empire. And that was okay because the Protestant princes were going to make life difficult for the Holy Roman Emperor, and that was okay. The French king also had a series of alliances with the Ottoman Turks, who were Muslims, and that was okay because the Ottoman Turks were going to make life difficult for the Holy Roman Emperor. But Catherine really began to fear French interference with a Protestant cause in the Netherlands against the Spanish, who were to the south of France, and that seemed not to be okay. So what we need to now realize and understand is this is an internal conflict in France that is going to go international, and there's going to be a geopolitical aspect to the French internal wars of religion, and we're going to see that carry out throughout this next period, whether it be in the Netherlands and England, or back in the Holy Roman Empire when we look at the 30 Years' War. So everything worked out until it didn't, going back to this royal wedding. The wedding did take place on August 18th, 1572. It was celebrated in Paris. In Paris, there was a great gathering of Catholics and Protestants alike that came together to celebrate the union of these two houses and hopefully put an end to the bloodshed. And that is what we're going to pick up in the next lecture.